'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free. 'Tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. These opening lines of the well-beloved Shaker hymn entitled Simple Gifts strike, I think, a very different, perhaps even diminished chord in our time as we prepare our hearts and minds for the upcoming holidays. For ours is a time when many have been hit hard by the pandemic, a time when many have come under the valley of the shadow of loneliness, loss of loved ones, or much joy. And does this sound anywhere near where you live? Rather than this song's lyric of the valley of love and delight. And yet, is it not so that in every time and place, when we give time to ponder, giving God thanks, even for the very simple things in life, for family and friends, for our work and a warm home, for the freedom to be able to gather at worship as a family of faith and to do even simple ministries of compassion and kindness for our neighbor? Yes, as the song goes, when we come down, that is with humility, that we find ourselves in a place just right. As the verse concludes, the valley of love and delight. And so it is that I'd like to share a story in this consecrated season of stewardship and thanksgiving that I pray this day will inspire a simple gift of love and delight in your life as a family of First Lutheran Church and our ministry together in Jesus' name. It was in the winter of 1959, and I was first introduced to a simple yet profound meaning of stewardship through the defining lives of two great saints, Oscar and Gina Howe. They were this elderly couple who'd immigrated from Norway to the North Woods of Minnesota at the turn of the 20th century. They'd worked hard at making simple ends meet with a farm of rocky soil. And somehow, day by day, God had helped them churn this rocky soil into daily bread. They were now in their autumn years, wintry years, with only a few sheep and a dairy cow left for income. And they lived in abject poverty. Oscar and Gina belonged to a small country church near Bagley, Minnesota, where my father served his first three-point parish. I recall as a young boy assisting my father in bringing communion to their small home, a small log cabin that was tucked away deep in the tall stands of pine, where winter and our old Pontiac would come punching through deep drifts of freshly fallen snow. I can still remember the burst of warm air as we entered their cabin. Equally warm was Oscar's greeting. As I look back on it now, he looked like Hans Olsa and O.E. Rovag's Giants in the Earth, for everything about this Minnesota woodsman was of unusual proportion. His massive body made me stop and gawk, if not only to see if those double XL overalls could keep that massive swagger contained without the buttons popping. He loved to tease, but equally so, Oscar was a man of principle. Right was right, and wrong was wrong. Thus it had always been and would remain as long as the earth should stand. But most of all, Oscar, along with his beloved wife, Gina, was a man of deep and abiding faith. The seed had taken root in their life together, even if it hadn't in the soil that surrounded them. On one visit, as Gina and my father were preparing a table in the middle of the living room for communion, I noticed Oscar taking a small tin can from a shelf. Candy, perhaps, I thought. What's that? I asked eagerly. Well then, Johnny, this here is Gina and my first fruits for God. Well, it didn't look much like fruit to me. And then Oscar poured the contents out into my hands. No, not apples or oranges, but pennies, some nickels and dimes, a couple of crumpled up dollar bills. So how much do you count there then? He asked. $10, I replied. But where's the fruit? Oscar let out a big laugh and explained, "Well, that's it. That's our first fruit, Johnny, the offering we give to the church each month in thanksgiving for all God's blessings. The Bible teaches us that it's the right thing to do, not only for others who are in need, but ourselves. Now please give this to your dad to take to the church." Well, at first, it didn't seem like much until I later learned from my dad that after all the sewing Gina took in, along with their simple lumbering and livestock produce, Gina and Oscar maybe earned $100 a month at best. Oh, the abundance in scarcity when given with a heart of thankful stewardship. Treasure in a simple tin can. Even at such a young age, I was humbled by their gesture. I somehow wanted to tug at my dad's coat as we left. Dad, hey, they need this money as much as, if not more than, anyone. But now, some 60 years later, I realize they'd follow Jesus' teaching that it's more blessed to give than to receive, and that the gift of tithing and pledging is what God calls us to be as his people. And I'm sure that the $10 they gave to support God's work through the ministry and mission of their small parish brought Oscar and Gina greater joy than the $90 that was left over. The love and delight of simple gifts received and given. My friends, may it be so even among us. God's grace to you this day and always.